Welcome, everyone, and happy Women's History Month. I'm Katie Capuzzo, General Manager of WISE, and together we're a global community dedicated to empowering women in sales with the network and the knowledge needed to be successful. Before we jump into the conversation, I want to thank our partners, as always, for making events like this possible. And special thanks to Autodesk and 360 Learning for lending us the panelists on screen with me. Are you playing an active role in building your brand? If not, you should be. And today we'll discuss why it's important and ways to identify and promote what makes you special. Joining me in the conversation is Kassidi Sorensen, Employer Brand Manager at Autodesk, and Maddie Suppon, Head of Sales Engineering for North America at 360 Learning. Kassidi, I will hand it over to you first to tell us a bit more about yourself.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. My name is Kassidi Sorensen. I use she, her pronouns, and I am an employer brand manager at Autodesk, which is a software company in the design and make space. In my role as an employer brand manager, I basically partner with our talent acquisition teams to develop marketing strategies to help us attract talent. And really a big part of what I do is also helping educate and empower our employees on how they can share their authentic experiences and stories within the company, outside of the company, with impact to be able to not only build their personal brands, but to help us reach more talent in their network. So part of why I'm so excited to be here with all of you today.
Thank you. We're going to unpack all of that in a few minutes. Maddie, I'll hand it over to you.
Hi, I'm Maddie Suppon. I am so excited to be here. I think I definitely have a different spin on it than Kassidi does because this is something that I've taken on just kind of myself. I kind of came back from maternity leave and I noticed that I just needed to get more involved in the community and how do I actually start to build my own brand. And I started to just dig into all of those things. And being a head of sales engineering and being a woman in tech, a woman in sales is a unique kind of experience and a unique kind of viewpoint on certain topics. And so I just thought, like, why not me? Why not dig into those like topics a little bit more? And I did a lot of like trial and error. So I'm super excited to share kind of all of that with y'all today. I am originally from Wisconsin, but I live in Florida. So I'm in the sunny weather right now, but my Wisconsin will might sneak out a couple times as we chat here today. So if it does, that's why. But I'm really excited to be here, and I can't wait to start the conversation.
I might have heard it a little bit when you said
Wisconsin.
The word Wisconsin.
Yeah. Wisconsin. If I say Ernol is another one. Does that make sense? Ernol. Yeah.
I love it. Well, you will keep us all on our toes. It's funny. We have accents from across the United States this morning, me being originally from the South. So we've got all of our bases covered today. I want to remind everyone that throughout the conversation, let us know where you're tuning in from. I see a few already in the chat, which is great. If you have a question, use the Ask a Question feature at the side of your screen, and we'll get to it during the Q&A portion. So as kind of covered already, whether you're currently job searching or you're at a role where you're looking for a promotion or just wondering, am I standing out? Am I getting a message across that I'm wanting to promote? This session is for you. So let's get into it. We have a first question for both of you, and we'll start with you, Kassidi. We want to get on the same page here. So how do each of you define a professional brand, and why is it important, especially for women, to shape their own narrative?
Yeah, it's a great question. I personally define a personal brand as how you present yourself, your skills, your experience, and really your career goals to others. I like to say that it's what makes you uniquely you, and it really helps set you apart from the rest of the pack on the job market. But more than that, it's really something that you have to put work in to establish, identify, promote, and really maintain over time. I personally credit my personal brand to really every opportunity I've had since entering the job market after graduating college. A personal story I can share as an example of that is when I was really first trying to get my foot in the door somewhere and start in my career. I was browsing for jobs and I found a job as a digital marketing manager that I was really, really interested in. But they wanted several more years of experience than I had. I think at the time it was like 5 to 7 years of experience, and obviously someone just starting out entry level, not quite relevant, but I was super interested and passionate about the job, and I applied anyways. The hiring manager actually ended up calling me and letting me know that even though I didn't have enough experience, she wanted to interview me anyways. because she was really impressed by my LinkedIn profile and then my online portfolio that I created for myself at the time. And so she decided to interview me despite not having really anywhere close to enough experience, and ultimately ended up advocating for me to have to be brought in on her team at an entry level role as a digital marketing specialist. And so that really I attribute to how I've gotten to where I am today. And I personally think that it's so important for women to shape their own personal brand, because it paints really a three-dimensional picture of yourself that can go so much further than a resume or even a LinkedIn profile alone. Something I also really like to say is that the art of communicating your personal brand is really the art of marketing yourself.
I love that. And I want to just have a moment of celebration for you that you applied anyway. As women, it is so common for us to see a job description and think, oh, I don't really fit those responsibilities needed. I'm not going to apply. But you did it anyway. I love that. And it just goes to show that if you do and you are able to back it up through LinkedIn and maybe your interest in a role, that why shouldn't you be considered for the role? So kudos to you, Maddie. Thoughts on that?
I do actually, and so I have a very similar story kind of with 360 Learning. So when I was leaving my past role, I was there for almost 8 years. So I started as an intern, went into implementation and support, over to sales engineering, and I was just thought I was going to be a lifer because that's what our parents did and things like that. And then I just started to kind of branch my wings, and I decided that my story was going to be different. And I found this job posting at 360 Learning. I read it and I missed one requirement. One. And I did not apply for 3 weeks because I was like, oh, I can't do that one thing, that one thing. And then I was reading this book called Between Grit and Grace. And they quote a Stanford study in there that the Stanford study says women apply for jobs if they meet 100% of the role requirements, and men apply if they meet 60. And then after I read that, I was like, I'm going to apply. 2 weeks later, I got the job, and now here I am 3 years later as the head of sales
Wow.
engineering. So kind of unrelated, but still like super just really important. Just go out there. But that's kind of what got me thinking about building my career story, because was only ever going to stay at one place. And so when I've thought about like approaching my personal brand, I think about it, what do I want my story to be? I kind of have an idea of what I want each chapter to look like, what I want the ending to look like. And you have to have that vision of where you're going to actually build your brand. So whenever that next opportunity comes up, whether it's expanding your network or applying for a promotion or getting a completely different role, if you know what the story you want to tell in your interview and your promotion to your boss about what you've been doing, if you know what that story is, then you can use these little puzzle pieces to actually like solidify and make your story a lot stronger. Like, for example, working at a startup and being the head of sales engineering, I have a lot of responsibilities beyond just my like 3 years of experience here. I kind of joke and say it's like each year is 3 years. So like technically I probably have like 9 years of experience doing what I'm doing now. But on a resume, it's 3 years, So how can I actually go in and show my expertise and my knowledge? Obviously, I can, if you get an interview, if you get that opportunity to talk to somebody, then you can kind of promote yourself that way. But building that brand and having somebody go do their research on you, because recruiters are going out and looking, how are you doing on LinkedIn? What are you talking about? What are those things? If you have that idea in mind ahead of time of how do I want to portray myself externally to people that might be interested in me, that's where you can really start to leverage and build your own personal brand and determine what you want your career story to be and leverage LinkedIn to do so.
I have a question again for you, Maddie, to start,
Mhm.
and then Cassidy, want your thoughts on this. And you mentioned a little bit, Maddie, in your intro about this. How would you actually describe your brand? Do
Yeah.
you recall a time when you became aware and intentional about building it? And then what did that aha moment look like?
Yeah, it was definitely when I was on maternity leave. My daughter is 8 months old. I have a 3-year-old son. But when I was right before I went on maternity leave, I was kind of posting on LinkedIn and I was getting a little bit of traction. And then I was actually looking for some like resources of like how to plan for maternity leave as like a women in sales, as a leader. Like, how do I set my team up to be successful? And I was trying to browse through LinkedIn and I wasn't really finding those types of comments and communications. It's a lot of like professional things, which is great, but I wanted to kind of take an additional spin and be relatable, have an emphasis on sales engineering, have some leadership, but like sprinkle some like mom and some like real life stuff in there as well to share, because it's definitely a balance. I mean, we talk about work-life balance all the time, but work-life balance truly means work and life. And so trying to have this personal brand that displays both and go out there and identify like, hey, I'm great at my job. I have all these professional accolades as well, but the real life person in me that has a family, that has, other things to contribute, we're all dealing with it. So I think it's important that we talk about it and bring it to the table, because it affects your day to day and it affects your career. And so if you can just kind of show how to navigate those challenges that come up in your personal life in a positive way, and help, how did you do it? How did you overcome it? Whatever those things are, I think that that's super helpful. But definitely my aha moment was on maternity leave scrolling. And right before, I was like, there's a gap here. Like, I'm not seeing as many sales engineer leaders. There's definitely a couple of them and they're amazing. But I thought, like, why not me? Why can't I, start to share these things and kind of provide that persona, I suppose, like externally.
I love that. Kassidi, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think really to add to what Maddie shared, like the why not me piece really stands out. I think, when I think about even myself early in my career and a lot of the women that I know in my life, like tend to be very humble and, oftentimes like we'll even lend credit to something that we've led or done or accomplished as, a way of showing that we're trusted partners. When in reality, it is important to take ownership and pride in our accomplishments. And for me personally, my personal brand is really all about authenticity, vulnerability, empowerment, and really coupling that with strategic intent. How that really shows up for me in my job is really empowering our employees to be able to share their authentic stories and experiences, and teaching them how to do that with a combination of like digital marketing best practices and storytelling tips. And I'm really passionate about those things for the sake of creating like a more equitable and inclusive future. Um, and so within my role, like it really shows up in the talent attraction space by, again, helping empower employees to really feel comfortable sharing their stories so that talent outside of the company has a sense of what it's like to actually work here from the perspective of a real human being. Because, we're bombarded by advertisements these days, to where it's really like whittled our trust when we're hearing from brands. And so it's so much more impactful to be able to hear from somebody, a real human being, especially when they share in an identity that, really aligns with your own. I think my first aha moment around my personal brand came shortly after I actually received my ADHD diagnosis, which was really early on in my career, but later in life, because men statistically get diagnosed a lot earlier in life than women. I decided to just write my own article on LinkedIn about my personal experience as a woman being diagnosed in adulthood. Um, and really doing that, sharing my story in that way, helped me move from a place of fear and kind of insecurity. And it really helped me kind of internally process that journey, and took me to a place of empowerment. And the result of that was having so many people like in and outside of my company reach out to me, letting me know, like, thank you for doing this. Like, this helped me feel really seen and heard. I feel like I have safety to be able to share my own story now too, and you can kind of feel like a sense of pride in my own diagnosis. And so, really all of that led to kind of where I am today, which now at my company, I lead one of our employee resource groups that supports mental health, neurodivergence, and disability. And I really credit a lot of that to just having the courage and vulnerability to embrace that part of my identity and feel confident and empowered to express that outwards as part of my personal brand.
Thank you both for sharing. I think Lydia said it best in this post where she said, people want what's real. And the fact that both of you really leaned into what makes you, you, and that authenticity clearly comes across. And I love that that has really been the platform for both of you and where you started. Kassidi, imposter syndrome
Katie,
is
sorry.
Yep.
Before we go on to that, I forgot one piece, and I want to make sure I like mention it because I think it's also important.
Please.
So I also, when I decided that I was gonna like start posting and like show up on LinkedIn, I kind of felt silly. I think we talked about this in our prep call, and we might talk about it later. Is like there is an apprehension about going into LinkedIn. My my LinkedIn still says Madeline like M for like my maiden name. I could probably figure out how to change it, but I did it in my freshman year of college. Like we had to go in and create these. And I remember like making fun of like LinkedIn when it came out, like when I was a freshman. I was like, I'm never who's gonna use social media for like professional stuff. And then now, fast forward, I don't know, 14 years later, here we are. And I think in my mind, I just needed to get over like that hump of like, I need to share. This isn't silly. This is going to be impactful. And I also had no idea where to start. What does it mean to build a personal brand? I don't have a marketing background. I don't have that kind of mindset when I came to it. So I kind of feel silly sharing it. But I did. I went out to ChatGPT and I was like, I want to be a thought leader on LinkedIn. I want to post about female sales engineering. I sell a SaaS product. Like, what kind of topics should I post about? And like, it generated a list for me. And then I was reading it and I was actually shocked about how like generic and easy and tangible the topics were. Like, I don't really know what I was expecting, but it got me thinking. And I'm actually noticed that this list is stuff that I talk about literally every single day. So what I do is I just take little notes on my notepad, like in my meetings from the week prior, whatever I'm doing. If something comes up, I write it down. It's right here. And then I cross things out and I just like rip my pages out, but I have all of my little notes. And then that inspires my posts for the next week. So it's not something that's has to be hard. You don't have to spend hours and hours doing it. Just jot your stuff down as you're going through, like, oh, hey, that was impactful. Or I learned something from my manager, or I talked to a coworker. Like, it really doesn't have to be like all of these huge, insightful, long, bloggy post kind of things. It can literally just be inspired by real life, inspired from your experiences and what you're doing. And it all kind of matches that up. So, well, it was a kind of a silly exercise and I felt a little goofy going out and Googling or chat GPTing it. It actually helped prompt my brain to be like, oh, all of these things are relevant. Perfect. I do this every day. Why not just like go ahead and type my story out? And then kind of with that momming aspect as well, I talk a lot about in sales engineering to make sure you have a tailored approach, make sure your message is good, make sure it's customized, so on and so forth. Well, I shared a post a couple weeks ago about how I was making zucchini boat tacos for dinner, and my son is obsessed with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So I told him that they were Ninja Turtle tacos, and he was like all about it, but he would not have eaten a zucchini boat taco. So it's like same messaging, same content, same preparation, like different messaging, but same all the other things. And that still relates to sales engineering. So like I posted it out there. It's just kind of one of those things where you can take your real life and like embed it also in your career life and have those different kind of fun spins on things. And I just thought that was kind of a content comes from anywhere type of story.
It's so true.
Oh, sorry. I love that example and wanted to add that, like, I think there's this like stigma with LinkedIn a little bit that everything that you post has to be some sort of backwards humble brag of some sort. Like all of the things that you post on LinkedIn need to be about your awards and your accolades and all of that. But Maddie, like I think the example that you gave is the perfect demonstration of like what Lydia called out to in the chat of like people really want something that is real. And it doesn't always need to be something outstanding and like incredible that you're achieving. It can even be just like vulnerability around things that you're struggling with and kind of what you've learned through that struggle. That can really, again, just like help people better understand, especially from a hiring manager's perspective, like when they bring you into their company, who is the human being that is going to be on their team.
Yeah, it's so true. Just getting over that hurdle and don't overthink it. Just post. One thing you said, Maddie, is funny to me that you thought, LinkedIn's not going to turn into anything. This is silly. I'm going to age myself, but at least you didn't think that about texting, which I remember when people started texting, I thought, why would they ever do this? You can just hop on the phone. How wrong was I? Unless you're in sales, pick up the phone, right?
Yeah.
All right, Kassidi, imposter syndrome is real regardless of seniority, but it can weigh even heavier for those early in their careers. What strategies do you have for those overcoming and gaining confidence in themselves?
Oh my gosh, I think one of the things that has honestly surprised me most in my career, especially recently, is the realization that there is not one human being alive that is immune to imposter syndrome. Just some people I think are better at hiding it than others is the reality. And I know it can really start to feel like a cliche hearing that over and over and over again. I'm sure this probably isn't the first time someone has said this in a webinar. But personally, this year is the first time that I've actually believed that. I mentioned earlier that I lead one of our employee resource groups at my company. And this last year was my first time stepping into a people leadership role for a global team. And I had a really vulnerable conversation with our chief people officer, Rebecca Pierce, where I basically just let her know I was really struggling with imposter syndrome in this role. It was, my first time going from being an individual contributor to suddenly I'm leading this big global team for a really important global initiative. And not only did she give me reassurance in that moment, but she also revealed that it was something that she really still struggles with too. And it gave me, a sense of reassurance that, okay, if this is somebody that I look up to so much as being incredibly qualified for her role, highly competent, a thought leader in her space, then the odds are that there are probably others that look to me in the same way. And so to have just another woman that I deeply admire, basically at the very top of the corporate ladder, admit that this is something that she struggles with still, was really the first time that I actually believed that everybody struggles with imposter syndrome in some way, shape, or form. They just, again, might not show it. So I think my advice that I've just kind of learned as I've navigated this journey myself, to really just gain confidence, especially early in your career, is a few different things. First, I would say, really try to separate your feelings from facts. So your feelings of inadequacy around how you think you're being perceived aren't a true reflection of your actual abilities. So really try to remember that you were hired and brought into your company for a reason. And the reason isn't to know everything. You're never expected to know everything. One exercise that can be helpful if you're struggling with this is to really just list out your achievements and skills to visually remind yourself why you were hired. If you're somebody who also has a hard time separating feelings from facts, this is a trick that I learned from my therapist around practicing self-compassion, would be to really center around what advice would you give to a friend that confided in you that they were struggling with this? Because especially as women, I think oftentimes we are way harder on ourselves than anyone else could ever be. I think the next thing that has really helped me is looking for sponsorship at work. And a lot of times we think this needs to be a big and formal thing, but honestly, the best ways that I have found mentors over time has been just messaging or emailing someone and letting them know, hey, here's what I think I could learn from you. Here's what my personal goals are. Would you be down to have a 15, 30-minute virtual coffee chat just to connect? And share how you're helping to grow, and really try to also kind of articulate what value you feel like you can share, in return with them as well. But really just finding those people that you can be safe being vulnerable with, and let them know that you're struggling. Like for me, my mentors and sponsors, these are the people that I ask for feedback. These are the people that I go to when I'm having a hard time with something and need coaching. And especially folks that are more seasoned in their career, even if it's just a few years, they can provide support and perspective to you. And then I would say last from there, if you've tried all of those things, don't be afraid to seek even more professional help if you need it. At Autodesk, we offer career coaching through an organization called Bravely. And it's one of those things that, even if you're not someone who works at Autodesk, you can engage with them. But when I've worked with them in the past, they've taught me a lot of tangible tactics to be able to help build my confidence over time. One of them that I can share was how to set more realistic goals and break larger tasks into just smaller, more manageable steps. So that way you can get some success behind you and build your confidence over time. But I think above all else, my biggest advice would be really just don't be afraid to be seen trying. I know it can be really scary to put yourself out there, and that imposter syndrome, especially early on, is a very real thing. But again, just take that reassurance in knowing that you're not alone in that struggle, and as you over time feel safe to make yourself more vulnerable to that, I think you'll be surprised at what you hear in response to the people that you do that with.
What my inner sorority girl wanted to snap so much when you said the separate your facts and feelings. I actually did like a little bit below. I was like, yes. No, I mean, that was awesome. Great advice.
Thank you.
And this kind of bounces off of that. Maddie, as a head of sales engineering, you're in a technical role. And I'll also note that your entire team is female, which is amazing. Because technical roles are typically more male dominated, I imagine you've run into situations where you and your team's aptitude is questioned. Tell us more about how you've overcome those stereotypes.
Yeah, and it actually just happened to me a couple weeks ago. I did post in like the Wise forum about it if you guys want to go read about it in Slack. But essentially, it was somebody kind of blatantly saying, like, make sure you have a male technical person on the call to discuss this with our technical lead. And I obviously asked some questions about that, and my sales rep went back and was like, what's going on with this scenario? And the person was like, well, he just believes that men are more technical and they're going to be able to answer his questions. And so we ended up walking away from the opportunity, which was amazing just to get my support from my leadership team on that. And actually, then I went over to HR and it was just like, hey, we have internal DE&I things. Like, I know this would never, ever fly internally. We should probably have some internal or external DE&I kind of conversations as well. And within like 4 hours, he had like a comment out to the board along with the CEO and everybody just like kind of creating that policy. So I think for me, what that situation taught me about that imposter syndrome is still real. It comes up all of the time. I don't think it ever goes away, but self-awareness and self-advocation, I think, is key. When you can find your voice and you are aware that these are your feelings, but that's not how it's being portrayed externally. Other people don't view you that way. And I think, Kassidi, your facts and feelings is like so crucial in this, that self-awareness of stepping back from the situation and being like, that triggered me a lot. But like, here are the facts. Like, I absolutely am the most qualified person in America, the US, to talk to this individual man. But, you know, my feelings about this are XYZ. So like, how do we balance those things out? And I think having conversations with people helps a lot. My self-confidence and like imposter syndrome, I will say, like, has dwindled over time being in this role, just because I'm considered like a dinosaur now because it's a startup. And so I'm one of like the most senior people in North America. So that does help. But I think when I think about my role and I think about whatever those next steps like look like for me years down the road, I'm not going to have the experience on a resume, you know, maybe to back up like all of my knowledge. And so going into certain situations, that imposter syndrome will probably flare back up again. But I gain that confidence by my interactions on LinkedIn, people reaching out, having conversations, posting questions, posting prompts, and having other people in my network kind of comment back and forth. What I like to do in my posts is like to pose a question. Some questions are more engaging than other questions. And I think I talk about it later, but I use the same hashtags. I'm not sure if that works or not, but that's what Instagram told me to do. So I use the same hashtags over and over again. And I do actually seem to get some like traction. So when I use those hashtags and I'm posting into like my network of people, I'm getting comments and I'm getting suggestions. Hey, what do you guys do around XYZ scenario? And there'll be comments in my post, and then I can respond back and forth. And those kind of back and forth volleys help solidify, was I like totally correct in my assessment, or am I going to learn something? Either way, I'm growing. Either way, I'm strengthening. Either way, I'm like further stepping away from that imposter syndrome because I'm gaining more knowledge and I'm able to kind of like sit more internally with myself and just approach things a little bit more confidently. And I also think this old terrible adage of fake it till you make it is just an old tried and true. You are so much more powerful and you understand so much more than you get yourself credit for. And just show up, do your very best. And also remember, and I don't know is like perfectly an okay answer. A confident I don't know is 100% the right answer. Just make sure you figure it out. And whether it's a follow-up with a customer after the fact, or if it's just like something internally, make sure you find the right answer later. But it's okay to always say like, hey, I don't know, but let me dig into that further for you. A confident I don't know is never, ever the wrong thing, as long as you have a strong follow-up.
Woo, Kassidi, we saw the snaps. I'm sure our whole audience is probably doing that behind the scenes right now. I hate that happened to you, Maddie, but so proud of the fact that you approach leadership immediately and say, I will not stand for this. Mm-hmm. That's so important. And that advocacy for yourself and your team clearly goes a long way and was acted on pretty immediately, which is great.
Yeah, and that's where the imposter syndrome comes from like little micro interactions like that, where it creeps into your mind. Obviously, that was a very blatant one, but there's vibes. I'll get on a call, somebody will never say that to my face, but I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to show you that I know all of the things. Like, you got to kind of come in with that attitude, even though you might get that vibe that this person is expecting you to not be able to perform or not being able to do the certain things. If you come in and just be you and show all of your knowledge and all of your things, that it helps kind of creep that imposter syndrome away a little bit.
Yeah. Kassidi, you mentioned this a second ago about sponsors, mentors. So is it really important to cultivate a network, so to speak, of champions within your org to help advocate for you? And if so, how do we go about doing that?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I personally see a network of champions as an essential when it comes to career growth. Because these are people who can, like, when you're having those moments where you're experiencing imposter syndrome, they can remind you who you are. I remember a time where, kind of similar but different to what Maddie shared, where I was working somewhere, and outside of work, I do photography. It's something I'm really passionate about. I love photographing couples, elopements, small engagements, portrait, landscape photography, all the things. Just really love visual storytelling, and had the opportunity to bring that side of myself and that skill set into my job at the time, and do a photo shoot for employees. And I remember there was someone that had said, well, Kassidy's not a photographer. She didn't study photography in school, so she's not qualified to do this. Um, and that was a moment that I just had felt incredibly low, but I turned to my circle of people, my network of champions, which at that time was my manager and then my director. And they really instilled the confidence in me of, okay, this person might be saying that, but look at the work you've done, look at your portfolio. Like, you are a photographer, you do have this skill set. And so to have those people just remind me who I was, what I was capable of in that moment, was really critical to my confidence at the time. And, again, like, these are people who, when you find them, they're going to be in your corner. They're going to root for you. They're going to give you honest and really productive feedback. And they're going to be the people, most importantly, that advocate for you for opportunities that you might not be aware of. There's that saying of, like, you want to build connections with people, so that way when they're in rooms that you're not in and an opportunity comes up, they're bringing your name up. I've personally been shoulder tapped for, like, several opportunities just because of relationships that I've really taken the time to grow and invest in. And I've done the same. I really try to pay that forward. I've done the same for others because I was aware of their career goals. I was aware of their passions. I was aware of where they wanted to grow. And again, I shared earlier, my favorite way to do this is really just reaching out to people and asking for a 30-minute virtual coffee chat with them. I take this time to just, like, introduce myself and really take it as an opportunity to try and learn more about their background and their story, and really the work that they do and how they got to where they are. And then from there, try to nurture that relationship over time. I also really try to take these touch points as opportunities for me to share more about my background, passions, career goals, and really where I want to grow and how I feel like they might be able to help me along that journey. And I will say also, like, I do try to be intentional at the same time about making sure that these conversations aren't, just self-serving of what can this person do for me, but really taking time to build a genuine relationship, understanding their goals, their passions, their areas of interest, and trying to articulate, what value could I maybe provide to them in return? Like, is there someone in my network that I could introduce them to? Is there a unique part of my identity that maybe they don't have exposure to that might, help broaden their worldview on certain topics? And so I really try to approach it as, not just a take, but also a give at the same time.
I love that. And actually, that addresses the question Jendai threw in the chat, which was, how do you make mentorship a two-way street if you're the one being mentored? So you added some thoughts there on opening up your network, ways to kind of give your perspective that they may not have access to. Maddie, to touch on that quickly, is there anything else that you would add there as a way, if you're being mentored, to really make it a mutually beneficial relationship?
I mean, I think just the first thing that pops to my mind is like pay it forward, whether that's to your mentor, giving them a shout out, like acknowledging how much they've helped you grow and like how they've impacted you and like sharing that. Cause a lot of times I feel like the mentor is the one kind of uplifting and boosting the mentee and like giving them shout outs or like encouraging them. It's also nice to kind of reciprocate that feedback back to them of like, hey, this is how you've helped me. Like calling that out like directly, I think is a really, really great way to just reciprocate, but then pay it forward, in a year or two or whatever. If you see somebody that's interested, do kind of try to do what your mentor did with you. Give them time on your calendar, give them, that space to kind of come to you with certain things and just kind of have that really nice trickle down effect. Because eventually you're going to be in that mentor spot doing that with somebody else. And then obviously that it will help just kind of uplift more women and get us wherever we need to go or want to go in our goals and kind of aspirations in the future.
All really good, actionable takeaways for us. So thank you for sharing. Maddie, what advice do you have for those interested in transitioning to a role where their current experience doesn't quite align?
Yeah. So I started in implementation and support. I think sales engineering is kind of you fall into it. I've done a lot of interviews with people looking to join my team. And a lot of the times people don't like go, I didn't even know sales engineering was a thing when I was in college. I was a communications major. So that doesn't align at all, but you kind of fall into the role and you come from other departments. You find it kind of in your career. So I came from implementation and support. I worked for a company when I was in college, and then I was getting ready to graduate, and I said, I'm going to move to Florida. And they said, amazing, you can work from home in Florida. So I went and did that. I mean, and I've never ever gone back to an office, and I don't even know how to do that at all as like an adult. But now I was here. It was easy for them to send me to implementation and things, but then there started to be sales opportunities. And they're like, well, instead of sending somebody from Wisconsin, like Maddie's already here. So why don't we just kind of like have her go on these sales things? And I raised my hand. I said, yeah, that's cool. I didn't know if I was going to be into that or not, but there are opportunities kind of knocking. And if you accept things, even if they make you uncomfortable, even if you're not quite sure, that's where growth happens. So if you have somebody kind of inquiring, hey, would you be interested in this? If it is something you're slightly interested in, just go, dabble, test the waters. Testing the waters can mean, having leadership come to you and send you to sales calls, but it can also mean tapping somebody that you know internally. Hey, can I shadow one of your calls? Can I throw a coffee chat on and just talk about like what your day to day is? I think I'd be interested potentially in making a career move to XYZ role. It doesn't have to be anything official. It doesn't have to be with leadership. It can just be one of your coworkers that you just reach out to and say, hey, what is it like to be in sales enablement? What is it like to be a sales engineer? What about a mid-market, account executive? Whatever those things are, have those kind of mini conversations. And then again, that kind of goes back into that mentorship idea. Now, on the other aspect of not like kind of relying on somebody else to kind of prompt you to that, you can throw yourself into your professional development, like join the pre-sales collective, for example, is, a sales engineering kind of pre-sales professional network that has a lot of blogs and things that you can do. Find whatever network makes sense for you and throw yourself into professional development. Read books. I have so many books on sales and sales engineering, and I read a lot and I take whatever makes sense to me. When I approach professional development, I don't approach it as like, I need to do everything in this book. I come to it as like, what's going to resonate with me? What's going to strengthen me? And you can take it or leave it. And I use the same approach with like parenting books too. Like I'm not going to go by everything that says, but there are great nuggets in all of the things, as long as you're open to finding those nuggets and open to some disagreements as well. Of like, I might not totally agree with this sentiment. That's totally cool, but I get this part, and I'm going to make myself an expert on what I believe is right, and just being able to figure that out. Now, when you think about transitioning, think about what is your short-term goals? What are your long-term goals? Where do you see yourself going? And those can definitely shift, and be okay with the shift. I think that, especially when you go into college, it's like, what do you want to major in? You need to know immediately, and that's going to be the rest of your life. And once you get out of college and you start to apply for jobs, we still kind of have this pressure of like, if I pick this, I can't do anything else ever. And that's definitely not the case, but you can use your network, you can use your professional development, you can use kind of your connections to help guide you. And it's okay if your plan shifts, and it's okay if it changes, but to be all right with whatever that looks like for you. And using your personal brand along the way can help document that journey. It can help document your knowledge. It can help solidify like what you're actually bringing to the table, because a resume might not do that, especially if you're trying to transition. But if you're actively posting in networks, if you're actively posting on like whatever Slack channels those look like, commenting on forums and interacting with sales professionals, if you want to be like sales enablement for an example, if you're just actively doing those things, you're going to meet connections, and then recruiters are going to go out and like look at your LinkedIn, and they're going to look at see what you're doing, and it's going to help you make that transition a lot easier and help solidify your story, your career story, when you're kind of having those conversations and making that shift.
And a plug for Wise, we do
Yeah.
something called pods that happen monthly. We do it in cohorts quarterly. If you're interested in exploring different roles, put that in a sign up form for pods, because we can pair you with people in sales enablement, in sales and engineering, where you can make those connections and ask them questions and learn more about it before you're in it. I'm going to stick with Maddie quickly for this because it's a slight tweak on the question, where we just talked about what do you do to leverage your brand externally? So let's talk about it internally. If you're trying to get a promotion at your current job, how do you leverage that personal brand to help you along the way?
I actually did use this. They did look at it when I we call them level ups essentially, but it's like a mini kind of promotion. It's just looking at your skill sets. And one of the things that they look at is like your external impact. And so obviously I know not all companies are like that, but it helps solidify your story. You can point to so many more things. You can point to your internal and your external impact. You're going to be able to say like, hey, here is what I'm doing internally to make impact on the business, but here's what I'm doing externally to boost my knowledge, to show that I have these skills. Here's the connections that I'm building. You can double down essentially on the internal and the external aspects that you're bringing to the table. And it's not just the internal things that people are seeing. I think, I don't know, there's some Instagram reel I saw, and you need to tell your boss what you're doing. You need to tell them. They don't assume that they know. And that goes for internal stuff, but that also really goes for external stuff as well. And when you talk about the external stuff, don't assume that they know, and make sure you can have like the receipts essentially to back up like what you're doing externally. And that's really going to help level you up, or whatever your terminology in your company is, to take you to that next level, to get you that promotion, because you're showing that you're not just growing internally, you're growing externally as well, making you a really valuable asset to the team.
Anything to add there, Kassidi?
Oh my gosh, yeah. More of like I think just a tip on the how piece is one of like the best pieces of advice I got from a mentor early in my career was to create like a wins tracker, and have it in just like a format or something that you can access no matter where you go in your career. And just anytime you, whether it's finishing a project, getting a shout out from somebody, to make sure to note those in your wins folder, and try and like articulate like what was the impact of the effort that you put into whatever that was. That way, when it does come time to advocate for yourself for promotion cycles, it's like you have just a giant database basically to reference, because a lot of times in our roles, things move so quickly that it can be hard to remember all that you've accomplished in a year or 6 months even. So I think that's like one of the best pieces of advice that I've gotten in terms of how to help you do that with confidence, is just having something as kind of a source of truth that you can reference. And I love what Maddie said about like never assuming that your leaders know what you're accomplishing. One thing that can be really helpful in one-on-ones with your manager is like taking time to just acknowledge and share those wins with them. Like let them know things that you've recently accomplished. And, from there you can open conversations about, here's what I'm going to be tackling next. So I think that in and of itself is really powerful advice.
One thing, I love that idea. I keep track of them for like quarterly reviews. Like I have one for quarterly reviews, but I like the idea of just like a lifelong overarching. That's a super great. I'm gonna steal that. The one thing though that I do want to add to that, what you said, I lost it.
It'll come back.
It'll come back
to you.
Yeah, having
and when it does, interrupt me.
Oh, I remember. No, I remember now. So that list of things, you can go back and look at that for your imposter syndrome. Like if you're struggling in that day, because obviously we all have really great days and we have really bad days. Maybe you got off a really bad sales call or something happened. Go back and read through some of those things, re-solidify like, hey, you are doing great. Everybody has bad days, but it's nice to just have that living file that you can just go back to and be like, okay, We're just going to shake it off. It's all right. And then read in, and read what you have accomplished so far, and don't get hung up on the negative.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I want to encourage all of us with giving compliments and praise and just saying to someone, hey, I'm noticing something good that you're doing, is to say it. A lot of times we don't necessarily know that something went well. We presented really well in a meeting. We did this or that really well, because other people just assume, oh, they know, and don't actually vocalize it. So if you have those thoughts, say it. That's going to be my mantra, because there are a lot of times I want to give someone kudos and then the day gets away from me. So being intentional about that in the moment, so we can add it to our wins tracker. Kassidi, let's stick with you at the start of this one, and then Maddie, want your thoughts as well.
Yeah.
I want to get really tangible so people know what to do, what's actually effective when promoting their personal brand. So let's talk about LinkedIn. What should their profile look like? Should they be posting regularly? Maddie Cox threw in a question here of like, how often should I be posting if that's an avenue I want to go down? Is LinkedIn the only way that I should be externally promoting myself? So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a great question. This is something that I feel like, oh my gosh, I could talk about like in great depth for hours because I'm very passionate about it. So for just some like, I guess, added context into my role, I don't know if any of you who use LinkedIn have ever seen like advertisements maybe on your like news feed of companies trying to promote that they're hiring. But in my role, I am the person that is behind the scenes of things like that, pulling the levers and trying to run targeted advertisements to reach talent that aligns with our hiring goals. So I'm very familiar with like all of the components of a LinkedIn profile and how they can work to your advantage in terms of employers trying to find you. So, and it also too, I think LinkedIn is a great way to proceed, but it's just one of many ways. So I would really just recommend approaching this, I think, in 4 main steps. And really it's all about thinking like a marketer, even if you're not. So I think the first is really trying to think about who it is that you're hoping to reach with your personal brand, and taking some time to understand and maybe even research where they might be engaging online. So of course, LinkedIn is one, but it could honestly even be things like TikTok. It could be community forums on channels like Twitch, and there are professional networking groups like Wise. So really just take into consideration and take some time to really try and understand and articulate, if I put myself in the shoes of this person's perspective, where are they likely spending time engaging and interacting? From there, I would say really take into consideration your own online presence, and just do kind of a pulse check of like what social networks and professional networks you use and are active in. And try and think through which of those are you really comfortable starting to lean in and convey your personal brand on. Because, trying to think of, okay, I want to convey my personal brand on LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok all at once. That can be really overwhelming, especially when you're used to using some of those channels in like a more personal way. And so, take some time to think like, which do you feel most comfortable trying to start testing that out on? And LinkedIn is definitely, I would say, probably the safest and best place to start with that. But again, every social networking site has its own communities that are centered around your industry, your role, your skills, your areas of interest. And so I would say, as you gain more confidence over time, don't rule out some of those other like channels and sources. From there, the next step I would say is update your online profiles to really reflect that personal brand. So if we're looking at LinkedIn specifically as an example, some tips that I have for doing this would really be, one, take some time to craft a personal brand statement, which is basically more or less like a 1-sentence elevator pitch about yourself, articulating your personal brand. So for me, my personal brand statement is connecting talent with opportunity through digital marketing expertise and storytelling. And take this personal brand statement and add it to your LinkedIn profile as your headline. I think a lot of people use this space, your headline on your profile, to just list their job title. But the reality is that you can put your job title in the experiences section, and that's going to pull on recruiter searches. LinkedIn themselves actually recommend, like, as a best practice, taking that headline space and going beyond your job title with it. My next piece of advice would be like really taking time to make sure that your profile on LinkedIn is just built out as fully as possible. I think once you reach a certain point of building it out, they give your profile like an all-star badge or something like that. So really strive to get to that percentage of completion with your profile to get that. Adding your skills is definitely a big recommendation I have. So my advice would be to add a combination of both soft and hard skills, and add them for each of your experiences. But they do limit the amount that you can add. And so I would say if you have to prioritize one over the other, I personally recommend prioritizing some of those hard skills, because a lot of times, whether it be our recruiters or us on the employer brand side running advertisements, those hard skills are oftentimes the targeting parameters that we include. And then the soft skills are things that we look and really assess in that actual interview process. Um, Other things that are really helpful is if you can add examples of your work that you're allowed to share to your profile, awards you've won, or even like if you've spoken on a panel, sharing like a recording of that on your profile. Make sure to add those things to your profile. The next is probably the most important and time consuming. So step 3 would be to make a plan around what type of content you're going to post, because if you go in without a plan, and you're anything like me, then you're just not going to end up posting. My advice here is, of course, make sure that it aligns to your personal brand, but that every single post that you share is aligned to some sort of goal. So within the world of content marketing, there's 4 different goals of content. It's either to entertain, to persuade, to inspire, or to educate. So whatever you share, make sure that it is aligned to one of those goals. And that's really going to help boost your confidence, because, I think we all have times where we feel like, oh, what value is it going to add if I'm posting? There's already so many people, talking about this topic. But again, if you're aligning it to a goal, that's really going to help you with your confidence in that. Another tip I can share is really take some time to identify your own content pillars. So these are basically key themes or topics that you want to focus on with your content and really just become known from your audience on. Some of my personal content pillars that I've really identified as like part of my own reflections or in my personal brand are diversity and belonging, thought leadership, career advice, and then just my own personal values and background and experiences. But defining these again, they're going to really help with that confidence, because you know that you have kind of like a category of things that you can reference and pull from for inspiration when it comes to what actually to post about. Some other just final kind of tangible tips I have to help your content and your post perform well would be, of course, try to post around times when your audience is most likely to be online. That really comes with trial and error. So, to kind of address the question of like, how often do I post? Really, a lot of digital marketing is we say launch and learn. So start small, start with like maybe one time a week. If that doesn't feel manageable, start one time every 2 weeks. And then just take some time. And this is kind of the last step of it all. Like, make sure that you're taking time to reflect on what you've done. So, at the end of every month, like look at everything you've posted and really try to reflect and pay attention to what does well. So if you have a post that's receiving a lot of engagement, try and reflect on why that might be. Like, look at the time that you posted it at. Did you use like specific hashtags or keywords within your post? With hashtags and keywords, you really want to put yourself in the position of the people you're trying to reach and think, if I was a hiring manager in sales, like what would be some things that I'm searching for on this platform to where I might stumble across this content? And then, the last piece too, I think is really tying it all together by sharing engaging visuals to help your content stand out. Even if it's just like a fun, authentic team photo that you took at a conference and you're writing a reflection about it. Research from LinkedIn shows that content with visuals, whether it be photo, video, graphics, they get roughly 5 times more reach than just a plain text post by itself. So those I think would be all of my, I guess, high level tips. And then I also have a personal brand that kind of breaks out all of these one step at a time. And I've shared that with Wise, and that's something that can be shared after this as well, if that's of interest to people.
Yes, if you're wondering, where do I even start with identifying my personal brand, my brand pillars, I will be sharing the resource in our recap email tomorrow that all of you will get, as well as this recording and some of the highlights. So it'll include these goals that you mentioned, Jasmine, but just quickly, Kassidi, are you throwing in that 4th goal to the chat? Okay, Perfect. She'll recap that there. Maddie, anything to add
Yeah.
there? Because I know you have a slightly different take on some of this.
Yeah, so when I came back from maternity leave, I decided I was going to do this. I was like, I'm just going to post every single day for 30 days. And I love spreadsheets. So I went to my spreadsheet and I made my spreadsheet. I had how many connections I had, how many impressions I had, how many followers I had, and I just kept track of it. And I was just going to do it for 30 days. And I, started my little notebook of like what I found inspiration or found helpful for that prior week. And then I just used that to inspire that week's post. So it really wasn't that hard. On Mondays is usually when I do it. And I go in and I spend an hour or so writing my posts out. And then I schedule those one day every day, because LinkedIn has a little scheduler. I usually do around 9:30, 10:30, somewhere in between there in the mornings, or 2 to 3:30 in the afternoon. Right now, it's like Kassidi said, it's kind of trial by error. I have no idea. I just kind of made note of when I'm on LinkedIn and I have a free moment in my day, and that kind of tends to be when that is. So that's just what I've decided to post. But I actually am not actually physically typing them out. They're all scheduled. And that's been really, really helpful for me, because it's a lot more tangible to say like, hey, I have an hour on Mondays where I'm going to write my LinkedIn post for that week. I did every day, and then I saw huge growth. And so I was like, well, what happens if I do for 60 days and then 90 days? And then now I stopped posting every single day. Now it's about like 5 times a week, sometimes more, sometimes less, but I keep track of that. And then I've also found that I get way more engagement when I'm commenting and interacting as well. Sometimes it happens if I'm super busy that week, it just doesn't happen. But I've found that the more interaction you have with your posts as well, obviously, the better the next one is going to do, and so on and so forth. So just kind of some small extra tips that I've done to just been able to ramp my brand quickly, if that makes sense. The scheduling of the posts, the using the real life examples, and not overthinking it, and not putting too much pressure on myself to like have amazing posts every single time. It's more just like showing up every day with a post, and just being very present on my network.
Yeah, it seems like the consistency and the willingness to try are two big things to just
Yeah.
do. I'm going to skip a couple of these questions in respect of time here. So, for both of you, are there any follow recommendations people should look at for women amplifying their brand on LinkedIn, so that we can all have some visual examples outside of you two, which everyone's going to follow you on LinkedIn? Who are some other people that we can be aspiring towards?
Oh my gosh, Dara Treseder, our Chief Marketing Officer at Autodesk, hands down, full stop, the best example of someone I have seen with a strong personal brand that also does a good job of aligning their personal brand to her, to our corporate brand as a company. She also does just like a really fantastic job of incorporating both humor, heart, and authenticity into everything that she shares. And you can probably find her on any social network, any channel, but personally, I follow her on LinkedIn and Instagram, which are really great places to follow her. But my favorite piece of advice that she has shared is really to lift as you climb. And so, giving advice to other women who are feeling lost in their career. So if you're somebody watching this that you feel like you already have a really strong personal brand and you're doing a good job communicating it, use your voice and your platform to give advice to other women who are looking for that guidance. Super important to me to do that as I continue to progress in my career. And I know that it's important to Dara. So give her a follow. You will learn more from following her than I could probably articulate to you in a month of talking about this.
I think we could go a full month on a session like this. Y'all have
Yeah.
unpacked a lot today. Maddie, what about you?
I follow Sarah Jones, and it's Sara, no H. So Sarah Jones, she is sales engineering. So if that's something you're interested in, I absolutely love following her. And then also Zoe Hartsfield. She kind of was I guess if I have to point to somebody, she was definitely somebody that posted something on LinkedIn. She's a LinkedIn influencer essentially, and she was sharing some things about that. And I was like, huh, to be a LinkedIn influencer? What does that mean? And so that was kind of like what I stumbled upon while scrolling, probably at 3:00 in the morning while feeding the baby in the middle of the night, which kind of prompted the whole thing. So those two are definitely going to be like kind of my go-to people for following. And then one thing like I want to mention is like when you're promoting yourself, I think some of us think I'm going to be bossy. I'm going to come across as a know-it-all. I'm going to have people are going to have some sort of perception of me when I'm out there posting on LinkedIn. And the hardest thing is just getting over that hurdle, because you're going to be met with such amazing open arms and reactions from so many people. I got one little negative comment in my DMs once about being a millennial manager. I posted like a funny like millennial manager thing, and some boomer guy was like meh in my messages. But other than that, everybody else has been like so open, and they want to hear from you. And if you're bringing that real life human aspect to who you are on your posts, you're not going to come across as bossy or know it all. Like, you're not inserting yourself somewhere that you shouldn't be. Just show up and be you, and start to build your brand and baby step it, and also track it, because it's super awesome to see like that growth. And I think that that's kind of also what's kept me going as well, because I can look back and be like, wow, in 30 days I did this, in 60 days I did this, in 90 days I've done this, and now I've just like continued to track it, and it's really cool to see that.
Mm-hmm. You're not going to be everything to everyone, and
Nope.
you shouldn't try to be. So
Exactly.
knowing your audience, and that comes from your personal brand, is important. Thank you both so much. We are at time. This has been such a fun session, in addition to being just really helpful and insightful. So thank you for the time. If you're in the audience wondering, okay, I want to start, where do I start? One way is tomorrow's International Women's Day, and Wise is going to be taking over LinkedIn with some graphics and posts on what inspires us as women in sales or looking to get into sales, just general career advice. So if you see our post tomorrow, like it, share it, write your own thoughts and perspective on that as well. We would love that. And as a reminder, Autodesk, where Kassidi is located, is hiring. So if you're interested in exploring new opportunities, be sure to check out womeninSalesEverywhere.com and sign up for a membership to gain access to roles at over 30 plus hiring partners. Our next event is going to be March 27th, where we'll hear from leaders at Bandwidth and Fisher Investments on what they've learned while navigating being the only woman in the room throughout their career. So we invite you for that conversation. And as always, stick around for the community and grow your network through Wise. All right, I'll leave it with that. Have a good one, everybody.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.